It's so fitting. Today is International Women's Day, and we're joined by actress, producer, writer, entrepreneur Karyn Parsons, who you may remember as Hilary Banks from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air back in the 90s. But today we're celebrating this powerful woman who is making a move in Hollywood and through her literary work. So we're so excited that you're here with us at Bold TV today, Karyn.
Thank you. I think it's really good to be here talking to you.
And wearing her power suit, by the way, which is so appropriate.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your book, How High the Moon. It just came out. What was the inspiration behind this book?
Well, How High the Moon takes place in 1940s in the segregated South, in the Jim Crow South, in South Carolina. And my mother grew up in that time period. And, you know, my mother's very positive, and she presents her childhood to me always as this really happy time. And I think it started to occur to me that, wait a minute, there's something not quite right here. You know, she grew up during the Jim Crow South, and she grew up at a dangerous time. There's, you know, so much racial, such deep racial divide at that time, and racism. How could she be so happy? You know, I really wanted to kind of look and see what that would be like. And also, what would it be like if I kind of blended a little bit of like my childhood as an 11-year-old with my mother's in that setting, 1940s in the South, and wanted to see a little bit of what that would be like and what made her so happy. And, you know, quickly found out that community and family had so much to do with that.
And you also touch on colorism and through the lens of a child. Yes. Talk more about that.
Well, I experienced that this is a little girl who knows her mother, who she adores and really admires and looks up to, who's brown-skinned. And but she's not being raised by her mother. Her mother's in Boston. She's being raised by her grandparents. Everyone around her is black, and she's light-skinned, and she doesn't know who her father is. Mm-hmm. And so people are speculating, and people make comments and jabs because she looks different from everybody else. You know, many people believe that her father is white. And so she deals with the little barbs that come out of nowhere once in a while, that where people kind of acknowledge that they feel that she's different, where she doesn't feel different. You know, she's living with everyone. This is her family. This is her community. And then every now and then some kind of reminder comes up that you're different, and how people feel about it, how different people treat her because of it.
Would you say, not only from your personal experience, but even being a mother, having now you're raising two kids, now preteens and a teen, that that you wanted to give children something not only to read, but even adults can relate to it in some way? Yeah,
well, absolutely. I mean, this is a middle grade book, historical fiction novel. It's geared toward them, but it's very much a read that anybody could pick up and read, and I think get a lot from. I mean, one thing in doing historical fiction, which was a little bit, you know, daunting sometimes because there's so much research to be done. I mean, even with the smallest thing, I learned a lot along the way and was able to incorporate so much of what was going on at this time that we don't talk about all the time, that we don't know about, you know, is part of the world of these characters. And I think it's interesting. I think it would be interesting for anybody. It was certainly interesting for me to learn about. You know, the more I asked my mother questions and found out all these details about just what her everyday life was like, I was fascinated. I mean, she's walking around, as so many people are with us, with stories inside of them that we don't know about, you know, that we have no clue until you kind of scratch beneath the surface and ask the right questions, and you start to investigate and find out, like, oh, this is such a rich childhood you came from, and, you know, there's no evidence of it until you start to talk to the person.
What would you say would be like the key takeaway from How High the Moon? If someone were to pick up the book, they finish reading it, what do you want them to take out of it?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure how to answer that, but I want them to empathize with the characters, obviously, and I want them to possibly, I like the idea of challenging a little just how people perceive people when they meet them and what their expectations are of people. You know, I think we're so quick to judge who people are and what they're about, and I definitely like the idea of kind of stepping into a world and getting to know people, and maybe some of the preconceived ideas you have will be different. But I also, it is important to me, it is important to me that people learn about not just Ella, who's the protagonist of the story, but she's also affected when she goes to Boston to meet her mother, be with her mother for a while, and learns the stark difference between the life in the North and life in the South for a Black person. But also when she comes home, her good friend George Stinney Jr. has been arrested for the murder of 2 young white girls. And that's based on a real person, George Stinney Jr., who very few people seem to know about, was executed at the age of 14, the youngest person ever executed in this country wrongfully for the murder of 2 little girls. And I found not only is it a tremendous tragedy, but also so many people don't know about him or know that this horrible thing happened. And so that's important, I think, also for me to kind of introduce George to people so they know this.
The book sounds like it's a learning tool, really, for everyone of all ages.
Yeah, it can be. It definitely can be. There are areas of the book that I did not expect at all to have in it. But as I delve deeper into the time and the place, I found so many gems of our history that were so rich and exciting, things that have fallen away completely, we don't think about, we don't know about, that it's just so fun. It's like you're entering a whole new world in some aspects, but it's part of our history.
Bravo to you for telling the story and for penning your first literary work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're talking about representation, colorism. Let's transition and talk about the Oscars. Yeah. What an award-winning season. We look at a lot of movies that represented people of color.
Yeah.
We look at Black Panther, and then there's the Green Book. What were some of your takeaways and your thoughts about really representation in Hollywood and seeing some progression now with more color on the big screen?
Right. Well, I was very excited about, I think one of the things that was really exciting about this Oscars in seeing this very different Oscar presentation that we've seen in recent years was the fact that it was not long ago that we had the Oscars so white. It was a couple years ago, I think.
Right.
And, and everyone, I love that we can see that everyone sounded that bell so loudly that this is not right and this needs to be addressed. And Oscars So White happened. And here we are seeing that so many opportunities came up, so many different projects came up and came out that hired not only people in front of the camera, but behind the camera, who, as we see, when you're given opportunity and support, can do incredible things. Mm-hmm. And we saw that. And we saw people that were nominated and winning and going home with Oscars that were entirely deserving of it. And I just think that was very exciting because not only did we see the Oscar show be very different, but we saw how everyone talking about it and saying, we need to do something about representation. People started opening up and going, well, we didn't realize this was such a problem, and creating more opportunities and people delivering. I just thought it was so cool.
It was so cool, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was.
It was like, it went really completely different. Oscars So White to Oscars Very Colorful.
I know, it's true.
Very colorful.
It's true. But in terms of, and I thought it was kind of funny because every time somebody would come up, we were like, another Black person. Yes. But the thing that was really cool is that people that were taking home trophies, Oscars, were people that you were like, this was deserving. This is fantastic. It wasn't just a lot of hoopla or a lot of lip service. People weren't just, it wasn't just throwing a bone.
Right. They truly were deserving.
They were, and it's because people were given the opportunities and the support. It's like that's what all everyone's been talking about is, come on, people just want the opportunity. No one's asking for anything special. Just opportunities like other people have opportunities. And I just think it was great. It was exciting.
On this day, International Women's Day, let's also talk about this. Women won a record-breaking 15 Oscars. So we were like, not only people of color, but yes, women were taking home the awards.
Yes. Yeah, I think that also is incredibly exciting. Well, that's also, we've been hearing a lot of people who become more vocal. This is one of those places where I have such mixed feelings about the internet all the time. The love-hate relationship I think a lot of us have with social media. But that's something that I think when we can all rally together, we can make a big difference with things we can push. And I think that that's another place where you've seen people rally together and make a difference. Women.
Right. And then in your perspective too, your experience having worked in television, do you see a lot of progress being made, even in the TV space, with opportunities for women and people of color?
I'm not watching it as closely because I'm not involved in it. But as a viewer, from what I do see, it seems to me that that there's a difference being made. I think that there definitely are far more opportunities than when I was actively acting, many moons ago.
It seemed like it was just yesterday, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
It wasn't. but I know because somebody said something to me about back when you used to audition for parts, blah, blah, blah. And I was laughing because there was always one part. There was usually just like one part. There weren't a lot of parts out there. And I was also laughing because I was like, and Hallie usually got it.
Halle Berry.
Good old Hallie, man. She was killing. But I think that's one place, one measurement. For me, I went, oh gosh, that's definitely different. And it's so great to be able to see so many actors, not just young, I was going to say young actresses, but so many actors and actresses of color out there in good parts too. People are out there in good roles. So it's definitely things are changing. I mean, sometimes we get impatient. We want things to move faster for good reason. We get impatient, but looking at whether there's some change happening, I believe that there is.
You're a little bit removed from it, but if you were presented with an opportunity and there is talk of a reboot, could you see a reboot happening for Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Oh, well, if it were to happen, of course I would be there. Of course I would. I mean, I have a hard time seeing it happen, especially since we lost James Avery. Right. So it seems really hard to imagine. But yeah, follow those guys anywhere they go.
What are your thoughts, too, just about other reboots, like Will and Grace coming back and, having, for some of us, this sense of there's a connection. It's like we became part of that show. That show became part of us and part of our household and our living room and our family. But to see some of these shows coming back, I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it really means they touched on something, like you say, in the beginning. They really touched on something. And I think it's fun but it is curious that I don't know if it's because there are certain, I know the sitcom, for instance, we kind of saw the sitcom fall away for a while, and there was a lot of reality television, came in. And maybe that's a lot to do with it, is that so much reality television came in and a lot of the traditional 3 and 4 camera shows and even the filmed comedies, I think, or single camera comedies, I think, that people really responded to, we didn't see so much of. And now maybe we're just seeing that people are a little, not just nostalgic, but hungry. They're nostalgic for those shows and those characters and the feeling they had from all that, because that was real. That was really was good. But also, there's just not so much of it out there to look toward, probably. I mean, I can think of a few that are really good that are out there now. But maybe it's just that there aren't as many. I don't know. I think it's interesting to me. I mean, it's very interesting to me how year after year, people come up to me and say, I love that, I loved your show. It was my favorite show. And now it's my kid's favorite show. And then 5 years. Yeah. And then someone else will say that again to me. Like 5 years later, somebody will say the same thing. So it just keeps moving on to these. I don't know how long it'll last, but it's a really good feeling. We had no idea. I mean, I had no idea when we were doing it that this would happen. Couldn't have seen it.
What I admire about you is that you're leveraging your platform with your acting expertise to pour that into a work, your nonprofit, Sweet Blackberry. Yes. Tell us about that.
Well, Sweet Blackberry is a nonprofit organization. I started, how long? Over 10 years ago. I started it, the mission of Sweet Blackberry is to bring little-known stories of African-American achievement to children. And right now, the way that we're doing that primarily is through animated films, short animated films, and with a single narrator. So they're like a picture book come to life. And we've had Alfre Woodard, Queen Latifah, Chris Rock, and Lawrence Fishburne narrate these stories. So you've got these incredible talents bringing these pictures, and R. Gregory Christie is our illustrator, and his work is just beautiful. And so you know these things are coming to life, and they're telling stories that you just don't hear about. You know, in school, in the history books, unfortunately, Black history, you know, we're mostly taught about a handful of stories, and there's so much more out there. I mean, I think we're starting to see people tell more and reach out more, but a lot of the time, I found out that a lot of the materials weren't out there, that the teachers didn't have the resources, and so you'd hear the same stories, and they were amazing stories. Frederick Douglass's story is one of the most amazing stories you'll ever hear. But
there's a lot of untold stories out there.
Yes.
And I see a theme here, Karyn, that you love history.
Hello.
And you love telling stories, untold stories, and telling them in a very creative and colorful way. I watched a few clips of your sweet Blackberry animations. And if I were a child, I would just be so excited about learning about where I'm from.
Yeah.
Through this storytelling.
Well, I think that thank you for saying that. They're really these individuals are so inspiring, and I think children walk away feeling empowered, and they recognize what they're capable of, the greatness that they're capable of. And I think also we know that, you know, not just the media, but in society sometimes the messaging for children, especially children of color, is that they're lesser than. Is that they're, you know, and I just think it's really important that we get that early, we counter that early while society is working on healing itself, that we do what we can for these little people as they enter the world. And I think by planting the seeds of these stories and these people that came before, they have knowledge of these people, but they just kind of walk into the world like, oh yeah, I know who Bessie Coleman is. And they have her in them after they've learned these stories. I think we have the power to give them that, you know.
I love it. I wanted to ask, in closing, as we transition back to this being this is International Women's Day, but it's Women's History Month.
Right.
What is the significance about this month for you as a mother, as a wife, as this powerhouse? You know, what does this month mean to you? How do you resonate with this?
I mean, I think it's a reminder for all of us to about how incredibly powerful we are. I mean, and this is, as we said earlier, a really great time for women. You know, I have a daughter, and she loves being a young woman. I think she really sees the beauty, the strength, the power of that, and she is surrounded by other strong women who lift her up, and it's a really great time. It sounds so crazy. It's a great time to be a woman, but it is.
Yes, it is.
But it is. It is, and there's so many women that are doing so many. There's so many doors being kicked down and ceilings being busted open all the time, and it just reminds you so much of what you can do and who you are. I mean, I grew up in a time where there are so many you were being held down so much without any idea. You know, it's like the Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote about, you know, we just would like them to get their feet off of our neck thing. You know, I think we don't realize, or I didn't growing up, you know, you get used to certain treatment. You get used to things. You know, I love old black and white movies, but, you know, you watch them now, some of them, and I still love them. But you watch things and you go, wow, there's so much of our culture and our society that we have just, it just became the norm for women to be treated a certain way, to have very low expectations of what they could give. And there have been women along the way who've been like, no, I'm doing this, you know, and who've broken through constantly. And I think now more than ever, we as women can recognize that in ourselves. I can do this. I can do anything. I do not have to be held back. I do not have to be quiet. I do not have to worry about couching my, you know, what I have to say in some kind of soft, presentable package, you know, unless I'm going to be called a name or, you know, or dismissed.
we have a voice now, and it's very clear and adamant in society that women now have a voice.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important for us to step up, practice using it if we're not accustomed to it, and we have to remember the girls that are watching us too. For those of us especially who out of habit fall back into, and I'm calling myself out, who fall back into ways that they've grown up with, to stop it and to remember that they are watching and we can make a difference for them, as so many great women are right now. I mean, I'm being so inspired by women that are younger than me.
That was my final question is, who are some women who inspire you?
Oh, well, so now I'm thinking of women that are older than me.
Younger, old?
I mean, I think like I'm thinking of Carmen de Lavalade, who's an older woman, but oh my God, what grace, and she's just an incredible. She's got so much fire, but she's got it with so much grace, and I think she's amazing. Alfre Woodard, I met Alfre and worked with Alfre, and I think I walked around just kind of. The first time I met her, I got to play. She was the queen. We were in Gulliver's Travels, and I was her lady in waiting. And I think I walked around like, behind her, because she was in this. She's an activist, and she's brilliant, and so unwavering, and I think she manages to be this beautiful, strong woman, but with such grace and power. She just walks in and she's true to herself. And the women that I think that I really find that I admire the most they're so true. They just stay and they follow that compass. Sweet Blackberry's latest story is about Bessie Coleman, the aviator. Yes. And Bessie she was so young, but she had so much fire. And at a time when it was completely unheard of for a Black woman for anyone to fly a plane. Nobody knew that much about planes, right? But she was a Black woman in America. And she said, okay, I'll go to France if you guys won't teach me how to do it. And I think, I look, and it's crazy, but when I was doing that story, and still now, I look at Bessie's face, at her picture, and I am constantly inspired by her, by that strength and that pursuit of her truth. Like, this is what I want to do, and I can do it, and I can find a way to do it. And I think we're lucky right now. We're finding more and more that we can do more and more because of these women that came before.
Incredible. I want to say this. It's just been a pleasure learning about Karyn Parsons beyond Hilary Banks, but you're a woman of depth, substance, and I love that you're telling stories that need to be told, and you're leveraging your platform and using your voice. So bravo to you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming to Bold to chat with us.
Nice talking to you. I appreciate it. Thank you.